the EAP chat. Thanks, Tyson. Let me just repeat that. Tyson specializes in EAP and has a passion for social media. He founded EAP Chat and TLEAP and leads the Academic Reading Circle's ARC. His main research interests include critical reading and social media for professional development. And man, is he good at it. Tyson is currently president of TESOL Toronto. Welcome, everybody, and welcome, Tyson.
Thanks so much. I couldn't have written that bio better myself. Okay, so why don't you mute yourself, Jess, and then there won't be any feedback for a while, and I'll get started. So, howdy everybody. I'd like to thank you for coming to my session, and I won't feel bad if some of you have gone to Walton Burns halfway through or later on, but it is being recorded, so everything's all good. Just like last time, I want to see if you can point to where you are in the world, except we're going to use Blackboard Collaborate this time, and I want you to use the Sun tool. So you should see Sun. So you just click on that toolbar that's sort of beside the attendee's name, click on the Sun, and then plop it down on the map to wherever you are, like I've just done. And we should get a kind of good sense of where people are. So I'm popular among the Americas. No Europe. Well, that's interesting to note. Well, good. I'm glad to see that you guys have come. Oh, Anastasia, you can't see the map. Maybe there's a little bit of a lag. Can everybody else see the map? Okay. I'm not sure. Maybe there's a bit of a lag for you, but hopefully it will show up for you. Oops. Just a second. Heck. There we go. So I would like to start off with a little picture here. Everybody can see this picture, I'm hoping. Should say visuals. It's my title slide. And I'm very, very, very interested in visuals. What you should be able to see is my title slide and a picture of my dog. So maybe, let's try another tool. If you can see the slide, how about you raise your hand? That includes the tools that are above the attendees' names. You can see a happy face, and a step away, and a raised hand. So if you click on that raised hand button, I'm a little bit concerned. Right now there's only 4 of you that seem to be able to raise your hands. Okay, 8 people raised their hands, 9 people have raised their hands. And yeah, I'm going to sit here until all of you say you can see my slide, because otherwise it's not so useful. Okay, well, so far so good. Maybe it just takes a couple of seconds to load the slide, so I apologize if that happens. But anyway, what you can see here is a picture of Lulu. This is my dog Lulu, and we were going for a walk one day, and every day, or sorry, every Saturday and Sunday we go for a long walk, about an hour and a half or 2 hours around my neighborhood. And I always try to have my camera handy because there's always something to take a picture of. And you can imagine that in this photo, if you just normally took a picture standing up, you wouldn't quite get the same effect. So I actually did crouch down on the ground and tried to take the picture of Lulu smelling the flowers. Now, why is this a visual that I'm starting with? Well, it's because these types of things are visuals that we do every day these days. Where do we put a visual with some small bit of text that we write. In the chat box, maybe you can suggest where you might see a photo like this accompanied by a very small bit of text. Any ideas? So Facebook, Flickr, okay. Good. I think the point here is that we actually get a lot of visuals accompanied by a certain amount of text through social media, right? So we do it a lot more than we think we do. We accompany text with visuals in many aspects of our lives these days, thanks to social media. But of course, like number 2, I believe that's Sherry, it mentions this is not a new thing. Texts have been accompanied by visuals to help understand the meaning or grab attention for a long, long, long time. For example, in bus ads, that's true, in any kind of advertisement. And I think just because of social media, we are getting more and more used to doing it ourselves. My point here is that I always like to have text accompanied by visuals because it breaks the monotony of just seeing text, 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 text. And aside from that, visuals add an extra meaningful component for a learner when they're trying to pick up the language or the concepts in the text. And I want to show you today how we can go from very simple, small text to more academic text and how visuals can help learners understand those things. Oops. My slide seems slightly out of order, so I apologize. Here is the Facebook status that accompanied this photo. On July 15th, I typed, Lou and I literally stopped to smell the flowers today. Now, if you just saw this text without the visual attached to it, some questions might arise, right? First of all, who is Lou, right? If you saw this text just without anything and you didn't really know the context of why I was writing this or a whole lot about me, like a learner might, they wouldn't know if Lou is my dog or not. In fact, who might Lou be just based on the text itself? Any guess? Could be partner. Okay, partner. Could be partner, could be my friend. Do you know the gender? Could be a child, yes. Right? Who would you suppose Lou is in terms of gender? Yeah, probably male. Now her full name is actually Lulu, but I often just call her Lou. So there's a lot in that text that without a visual really doesn't help you very much because we don't have the context around it. And the visual, when you see the visual, it kind of helps out a little bit. Now, second thing, if we saw this text just by itself and you were a learner looking at this text, you might ask, okay, what were we doing? Right? So it says, Lou and I literally stopped to smell the flowers. Obviously, we stopped doing something in order to smell the flowers. If we didn't have this visual attached to it, what might we have been doing? Going for a walk, definitely. That is what we were doing for sure. Maybe. Sure, shopping at farmers market, working, reading, making presentations. Could be very possible. Now, for anybody who didn't say walking, which obviously is what we're doing, right? There's a reason why you might not know that we were walking, right? Even though it says stop to smell the flowers, right? Smell the flowers itself has a kind of embedded extra meaning to it, right? I know some people say smell the roses, but it's the same type of thing. You know, you could definitely suggest, you know, you need to stop and smell the flowers once in a while. And that doesn't suggest that necessarily you're going for a walk in order to do so, right? It's just figurative. right? But this photo actually shows, in fact, that we were going for a walk, and we, in fact, did smell flowers. Now, the other bit of text that this photo or this visual really helps represent is this word literally, right? So if we read through the sentence, we can see that I inserted the word literally to say what? Yep. Okay, for sure. It's actually something that we did. We really did this, right? We're not being figurative at all. We're not being idiomatic at all, right? So when you see this photo attached to the text, you can gain a whole bunch of meaning from the text that maybe you wouldn't normally have gotten without that visual. And that's why I like visuals so much. So this is just an example of a Facebook status, of course. Now, of course, you're not really giving your students Facebook statuses too much, but I did want to show how a visual can improve meaning and understanding of a very small piece of text. Because at a lower level, of course, the students aren't going to be exposed to gigantic pieces of text, which we might look at a little bit later. So including a visual with it, or having a student find a visual, can also improve the meaning of very, very small, low-level text. So let's look at a slightly different one. Before we look at another one, I wanted to talk briefly about what I look for in a visual when I'm looking for those things to help out text. I'm really looking for four main things. I want to make sure that the visual that I find or that I create is really meaningful for one concept in the text, right? I don't mean that visuals can't include a whole bunch of information, but I want to pick a visual that is going to help explain one particular concept of the text, whether that's vocabulary, whether that's a phrase, or whether that's intended meaning. I really want to focus on one thing. I want the visual to be very visually informative. In other words, I don't want, for the most part, to simply have cue cards for vocabulary, right? Anything that you can find in a dictionary or a photo dictionary, like, if you had the word apple, for example, and apple is now represented on a visual, right, a cue card that just shows an apple, that's not really that visually informative. It's not the same type of thing I'm talking about when finding visuals in this way. Think of the photo with Lulu, right? Literally, right? Literally was explained by looking at the photo, suggesting that we did in fact stop for flowers, that it wasn't idiomatic, because it shows that we were actually looking for flowers and smelling flowers there. So literally is not something that's just a translation straight from here's the word and there's the picture of the word. You have to think about it a little bit. So my point with this type of visual and concept is that we want it to be informative. We want to have something in the picture or in the visual, it doesn't have to be a picture, that gives a lot of information to help the students critically think. I also want visuals that will promote communication, right? So what I mean by this really is that the students, when they see the visual, will be able to talk about what's in that visual and relate it to the text. So it's going to cause students to talk to each other and use language in order to understand what they're reading by using the visual that's in the text. And number four, I aim for photos or videos or charts and things like that that are as reliable as possible. And when I say reliable, I'm suggesting students really need to navigate digital literacy a little bit, right? So, they use Google Images and find just an image that was on someone's blog might not be actually that accurate. So we want to make sure things are reliable, they know where things come from, and they check things like statistics and so on. So those are the four key aspects that I'm looking for in visuals when I'm trying to help students understand concepts in a text. So let's take a look at a few other texts. Here's a slightly longer text than the Facebook status entry. And this is something that is about the right appropriate size for a low-level student. The vocabulary isn't crazy difficult, but it is a little bit longer than one sentence. And it's once again about Lou, and I thought we'd just stick with her as a theme because she looks cute. This is a Tumblr journal entry I wrote about Lulu one day, and I want you to read it and think about what types of visuals do you think would help students understand parts of this text. So I'll give you a couple of seconds to read it quietly. Okay, so hopefully you've had a second to read it. Now, as you can tell, the language level really isn't that high, right? The students really shouldn't need to look too much into the dictionary to find the meaning of some of these words. However, the concept, right, the narrative that's happening in the story, parts of it might be a little bit difficult for a lower level student to understand. So, first I'd like to ask you, when reading through this text, if you were a kind of lower level student, what parts of the text or what concepts of the text do you think might be challenging for a student to understand beyond simply the word by word by word part? If you could give me a suggestion in the chat box, that'd be great. I totally agree. Looking smugly, right? Something was off. Yeah, maybe the den door. Despite my horror. Yeah, that's kind of it's sort of idiomatic in a sense. Yeah, for sure. There's a bit of troubling grammar in there as well. Right, Jen? Right? Despite my horror at the sight of what looked like a tornado had hit the wrapping paper. Right? That's sort of a very clausy type of sentence that students might get lost up in a bit. Okay. Now, when you were reading this text, did you make a visual in your head of what this might look like? What did you see in your head as you were reading this? Can you see a photo of my dog in your head? You already know what she looks like. Okay, so shocked expression, a small dog in the middle of a paper mess, paper-strewn floor, how articulate, and an innocent-looking dog, dog shaming 101. Okay, very good. Right? So what you can see is what's happening while you're reading a text. Although there is no visual attached to this text, you are connecting it with the visual in your head. Right? Now, of course, you know what my dog looks like because I've shown a picture to you of her before, but aside from that, you're putting together what the room might look like, how the dog might look, and a student in a lower level may not be able to do this. They may understand certain parts of this text, and they may be able to connect things visually here and there, but a visual would really be helpful in order to get them to understand many of those concepts that you had talked about earlier. So are you ready to see this photo? Yeah, I'm one of those people that dresses their dog. That's okay. I own it. So you can obviously see here, right, there is an excellent photo that just happens to represent the journal entry that I was writing about. And of course I took this photo and then I wrote the journal entry. But the point is that there are visuals that can accompany almost any kind of text and explain certain concepts in that text. What you can see, of course, is if you think back to what that text said, what in this does it actually help explain? Right? Well, here was the text. Right? When I got home, I knew something was off, right? Something was off, you can suggest, right? Something was not quite right. Something was a little bit unusual, right? I saw little pieces of paper on the floor in the hall, right? And we saw those in the photo. Since the den door's always closed when I'm at work, I knew Lou had done something to cause trouble, right? In that, we can see the picture of the den door open, and we can see all the little pieces of paper. So we know that something's sort of wrong in that case. When I opened the door, despite my horror at the sight of what looked like a tornado had hit the wrapping paper, we can see from the visual that, of course, there's paper all over the place, and it can help students understand that very clausy sentence. She looked at me smugly, like she had done something amazing. And you can see from her expression, of course, that Lulu looks like she has done something wonderful. She looks very proud of herself, I think. Certainly does clear up little bits of vocabulary, like wrapping paper. Of course, wrapping paper is something that you can jump right into a visual dictionary and you can see a photo of. Whereas something was off, you need the entire context, right? You need to see the visual itself. You know that based on the language that's in the text, that normally something isn't like this. And what isn't it? Of course, well, it's not that those little pieces of paper are all over the place, right? We can see a door. I think I've got a pointer here. Whoops. We can see, whoops, sorry. We can see the den doors there. We know that it's closed normally, but right now it's open. We can see, of course, that Lulu has got a smug face. We can see the tornado. And all of these things are visual helps a learner understand the concepts that are in this text, not just simply the vocabulary. Now, of course, you may be thinking, well, that's great. You know, you took a photo and then you described it, right? So obviously you had a visual that matched perfectly. And of course, that's not always the case. Oftentimes we're giving text to our students, especially at some higher levels, that don't have visuals that are really automatically given to them. So how can we find these visuals with the text when the text wasn't written afterwards? Well, here's an example. This is one of the texts that I gave to my students. Now, my students are EAP students. In other words, they study English for academic purposes in order to get into university. They are first-year students, actually, and they're taking a history course concurrently with my reading and writing course. And this is one of the texts that we gave them. So as you read through this text, I want you to think about what visuals come to mind when you read this text. And put those in the chat box. Now, I've condensed it quite a bit. Obviously, it's about China. Okay, so I think when most people are reading it, we're getting the sense of an old city. It's a city that is surrounded by walls. It's kind of idyllic. It hasn't been touched, right? Maybe the Red Guards would be something that would be a little bit difficult for the students to understand. But I think if we look at the text itself, the main point of the text is not so much about the Cultural Revolution or China's history exactly. It's more about what's going to happen to the city of Pingyao, right? So even though it has made it through the Cultural Revolution, all sorts of wars and so on, it is facing a threat right now as well. And the writer of this article is trying to suggest that, be careful, Pinyao, you could turn into a sort of different version of yourself, right? More like a theme park, exactly. So this is an example of a text, and there's part of this text that I think the students really wouldn't be able to find an example of just simply by looking in the dictionary. Now, of course, they might be able to see walled, right? Of course. They might be able to see where the Shaanxi province is. They would understand what destruction is. Now, with Cultural Revolution, they may need to actually look up on Google, but they wouldn't find one visual that really helps out with that. And Red Guards, of course, they would be able to take a look and find some pictures of Red Guards as well. But there's a lot in this second paragraph, actually, that isn't really something you would find specifically in the dictionary or just simply by typing in Google. And they're concepts. They're things that the student wouldn't really understand without seeing a visual attached to it, at least not that well. So let's talk about the types of visuals that IN, my student, found. Like Rana mentioned, and Jen too, this is the main characteristic of the article that we're trying to explain to the students in this case. And that is, what characteristics do you have of Disney? So what I want you to do is, I want you to take the text tool. So below where you got the sun, you'll see a big A. And if you click on the A, you will see a little crosshair with an A on your mouse, and you can click on the screen on the slide and you can type something. So for example, I just typed Disney character. So what I want you to do is try out this tool, and underneath on the slide somewhere with the text tool, let's see if you can type, what characteristics do you have of Disney? Don't be shy. You can't tell who's typing what. So Jen, just click on the A with the lines, and then you'll see a bigger A show up. Click on that A, and then you should be able to move over to the screen and type by clicking on the screen. And you can change color and all that kind of jazz too if you want to. Okay, awesome. So let's go through some of the ideas here. We have the castle from their logo, homogenized, colorful, cartoonish or fake, monetized fantasy fun, ooh, sexism, castle, silly, goofy, clean, sanitized version, and plastic, color, materialism, mascot, unreal. Okay, so we've got a good, conglomeration of what Disney is. Now, when you ask students this, what characteristics do you have of Disney? They have some of these same answers, but maybe not the ones that are kind of being referred to by the text, right? Such as homogenized or sanitized version or unreal, right? These types of things maybe don't really come up, especially for younger students, because maybe they haven't thought of Disney in that way, or maybe, in fact, they're just not exposed to Disney too much. So when they're trying to understand what it means in the text for the writer to suggest, be careful, Pinyao, you don't want to become a Disney version of yourself, it can be a complicated thing for them to understand, especially if you just try to orally explain it. So sometimes it's good to actually get a visual as well. So let's take a look. How many of you watched Game of Thrones? Okay, so we have some some enthusiasm for it. Here you can see an example of a Disney-fied advertisement for Game of Thrones. Right? Now, if you don't watch Game of Thrones, which, you know, I'll admit I haven't seen a whole lot of, this is the character that that Disney is referring to. Right? So we can see here's the real character. You know, his clothes are kind of rough. He looks a little bit banged up and dirty. His hair is very snowy and so on. And then we take a look at the Disney version. And we can see some of the characteristics that we were mentioning when we thought of Disney, right? You can see that he looks cleaner. You know, he doesn't have snow all over him. The snow's just sort of all around him. He's petting a kind of wolf. So the wolf looks very happy and not really about to eat him or anything like that. And he's quite happy. So you can see this is what we could say a Disney-fied version of Game of Thrones. How about this family? Does anybody know this one? Okay, so this is Family Guy. And Family Guy is about this family. They're on the Fox network, and you can see sort of the main cast of characters. Now, if you've ever watched this show, you would realize that they're not so clean and perfect like this most of the time. The storylines are a little bit more like this. So this show is particularly well known for not sanitizing itself, right? One of the main premises of the show is that the baby hates the mother, right? Because the mother always gives its bath, you know, reprimands him, and so on. So he's continuously plotting the death of his mother, right? So he's an evil genius, so to speak. And they don't shy away from letting this, you know, be the main theme of the cartoon. So it's very, very, very much says evil or disgusting in some ways. You know, people bark and people make fun of each other very rudely and so on. So if you ever watch this show, you would realize that this show is sort of the antithesis of Disney, right? It is very, very, very rude, very, very gross, and some negative concepts. But it is, of course, quite funny. Now, instead of just having a photo to explain what Disneyfication is, sometimes there are other visuals that can be helpful too. So what I'd like you to do is, I want you to actually go to this website. It's YouTube, actually. You can click the link in the chat box, and I want you to watch the video for a couple of minutes. It's very short, and I want you to think about what does it demonstrate about Disneyfication, and what characteristics does it emphasize in this video about Disneyfication. It is about the Family Guy, so just take a couple of minutes, and when you come back and you've finished watching the video, just come back and click the yes button or the check mark button, and that'll let me know that you're back. So when you're back, just click the check mark to show me that you're back. Okay, so it is a wonderful day for pie every day. So as you watch this, especially for those of you who've actually seen the Family Guy TV show before, how does it demonstrate Disneyfication? What characteristics of Disneyfication does it emphasize to you? Maybe in the chat box you can just mention a couple of things. Ooh, sex stereotypes. Okay. Yep. Isn't it funny that in when we talked about Disney movies before, nobody really mentioned the music, but it is kind of an integral part of Disney movies, isn't it? Small happy animals accompany everyone? Absolutely. Right? Birds, butterflies. Yes, definitely a lot of singing. Now, for those of you who have actually seen Family Guy before, how does it compare to actual Family Guy? How are the attitudes of the characters different than in a real episode? Sure, there's no satire. It's not cutting at all. Right? I showed this video to my students because I wanted to show them what happens when Disney takes a hold of something, right? So the idea here is that, like you mentioned sort of at the beginning, that when something is Disneyfied, it's sort of whitewashed, right? It's sanitized. All of the negative aspects are sort of either cut out completely or brought down to a level that isn't really that negative. And the whole idea with that text, the Pingyao text, this one here, is that it's trying to demonstrate to students what does the author mean when he's suggesting Pingyao could evolve into a perfect and tidy Disney version of itself, not that much different from the Temple of Heaven pavilion at Epcot, right? He's suggesting that this is kind of a negative thing, right? Being sanitized this way, becoming perfect and tidy, really isn't the goal for an old city like this. And because of things like tourism and so on, Pingyao could actually evolve into that type of way. So be quite careful of that. And I think both the photo of Game of Thrones being Disneyfied and the video of Family Guy being Disneyfied really does bring that home to the students, and they can understand now better that concept of Disney version of itself, instead of simply thinking, oh, well, a Disney version of itself must be very cute and happy and wonderful, and that is the way things should be, when in fact that's totally not the case, right? So hopefully you can understand, here's how a visual really helps. And here's another example of a text. Again, we're going slightly more advanced level with each of these texts because I want to show you a wide variety of levels and how visuals can help. In this case, I gave the students a text that was very much academic, and it was about the Quebec Charter of Values. And if some of you don't really know that because you're not from around here, Quebec in Canada is a French-speaking part of Canada, and they're very Catholic as well, typically. And they have just proposed, or last year, proposed a change to their Charter of Values in which they would ban all religious symbols from public spaces. So things like hijabs wouldn't be able to be worn in public spaces, and you wouldn't be able to have the Star of David, for example, on a necklace. Right? They even went so far as to suggest that language be removed that isn't French, but that obviously would be quite problematic. So here's a short excerpt from that text, and I want you to think, again, in this text, what concepts might be challenging for a higher level student, an EAP student to understand, and maybe what types of visuals would you recommend, either students find or you find yourself. Now I'll shut up. Okay, so you've brought up some interesting ideas. There's definitely some deconstruction that's necessary. Obviously, the language is a very high level. Obviously, the language and the grammar isn't so straightforward as someone mentioned about all the negatives that are in there. The one thing that I want to keep in mind is that we're not looking specifically at vocabulary, like at a very lexical level, or even necessarily at a grammatical level, right? We want the students, or at least in the case that I'm talking about, we want the visuals to help with the concepts of the text, right? Something that is not necessarily going to help them specifically with particular vocabulary, but with understanding the main idea, even conceptually. So here's a visual that seemed to make a little bit of sense. Now, Vince, you bring up a very good point, right? Visuals are easier to read. Now, in this case, there is text involved as well, being a political cartoon. And not all visuals have that text, and I'm not suggesting that visuals can't have text. But one major point of visuals is that because the text that you're giving the students is difficult for them to understand, whether it's simply on a word-by-word lexical level or whether it's more conceptual, visuals remove that barrier to understanding, or at least facilitate understanding a little bit more. And this is an example of one that does that. So going back to the actual text itself, what parts of this text does that political cartoon really help make students understand? Maybe you could talk specifically about the author's intention. Or maybe that's too difficult of a question. I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I mean, my main point here is that at a very high level, it's not so much about understanding word by word by word. It's more about understanding the concept and the intention of the author that's being talked about through this text. Because students in university, they are going to be exposed to this level of text, whether they're ready for it or not. And we need to be able to help the students find things that are going to help them understand what's going on in this text, even though it seems particularly difficult. And of course, the main point of this is that although the Quebec Charter of Values is supposedly removing religious symbols from all public places in order to make it a very secular type of society so no one's particularly offended, they have a kind of caveat to that where as anything that is regarded as a cultural heritage to Quebec isn't going to be removed. And many of those cultural heritage things are actually religiously based. So you can see, of course, that the cross and the flag, in fact, is religiously based. Right? Christmas is religious. Right? The cross inside schools is still going to be there. And in fact, in the last panel there, they're saying, don't worry, there's no religious influence, we fired Mr. Singh, right? So obviously they're just suggesting that anything that isn't Quebec cultural heritage is a problem, and they're going to fix it. So the main idea of that text is not only that Quebec is doing this, but that it is kind of hypocritical and silly. And I think by the use of extra visuals like this, students will be able to understand that concept a little bit more. And in fact, my students found this visual. I didn't source it for them. So it's very interesting that although you may think that students are incapable of understanding things at this level, you'd be surprised. In a group of 4 or 5, one of them may get it, especially when they're looking for other visuals about that subject. Now here's another visual that I found myself that I thought, okay, well, it's not a photo, it's not a video, it's not a political cartoon. In fact, it's a map, right? And although this map isn't exactly totally related to the concepts of the text, it does kind of give an interesting commentary on that text, because this whole visual is saying, when people weren't in Canada, when the Europeans hadn't yet come to Canada, or the States really, these are the languages that existed in all these places. And of course, if you're referring geographically to Montreal and Quebec in particular, you can see it's about around here. And is French one of those languages? Well, absolutely not. So what this visual could show to the students is that, if you do a little bit of critical thinking, the author is really suggesting that it is sort of stupid that Quebec is trying to rid the religious influence out of Quebec by simply getting rid of everything that isn't Quebec cultural heritage, when really, what is Quebec cultural heritage? At one point or other, Quebec cultural heritage didn't exist there either. So religious influence actually did affect Quebec entirely. Now, I'm running a little bit out of time, so I want to go a little bit fast to get through. This text is one that I was going to actually have you just try on your own and talk about, but I'm going to skip it. The slides are all available on SlideShare, so I'll give you that in just a second. But to sum up, I want to talk a little bit about the academic reading circles. It's an activity, and if you don't know much about the academic reading circles, it's kind of an activity where you get 4 or 5 people in a group. They all read the same text, and they all have a different role to look at that text from. And the role that is particularly related to what we're talking about today is the visualizer. So if you click on that link, or if you go to that link, you'll be able to read a little bit more about the academic reading circles. But the point is in this role, it's not the teacher. It's not the teacher who's bringing the visuals to the class. And that's my point. We don't always have to provide the visuals for a text to help students understand the text. We can push that onto the students, and they can have fun looking for these types of things. So in this type of activity, if they have the role of the visualizer, they are in fact looking for a photo that truly represents the feeling or aspect of a text. They're going to look for a satirical cartoon like we saw that might represent and help understand concepts and language in a text. Another visual could be a timeline. Many texts include lots of years and dates and so on, but they actually don't put them in order. And a timeline sourced by the students might be able to be helpful. They could find pie charts or graph charts or anything to make statistics look even more understandable, kind of like that map that I showed you. And of course, right now, infographics are all the rage, so they may be able to find infographics that are related to the topics that are in the text that they can share with their partners, and of course, help understand things a little bit more than they would if they just saw the text. One thing that I want to always emphasize to students, and really to us if we're looking for visuals too, are these 3 questions. And they relate to that first slide that we had about what were the key considerations. And they are, what concept in the text does the visual help explain? Both us and students need to recognize that we're not just looking for photos of people. We're looking for text or visuals that really do explain or facilitate understanding of one particular concept or piece of language in the text? Does the photo elaborate beyond just simply vocabulary? Again, I mentioned a warning of picking visuals that are only simply related to one word, right? We want something that's going to make the students think a little bit more and have the students be able to explain to their partners why they picked that visual, and have students discuss how that visual helps. And with regards to reliability, we have a habit of taking visuals from the internet, not really saying where they came from. Hopefully you noticed throughout my slides I tried to put the source, and I think that's another thing, especially in higher levels, we need to get the students to really understand is that they can't just copy and paste. They need to explain and show where they got things from, because that transfers to writing too. So I'm going to end right there. Here are some resources that you can use to find some of the pictures. ELT Pics is a crowdsourced photo set by all language teachers. So there's lots and lots of photos that you can use for free there. File, despite the tacky name, also is a free photo archive. Common Craft has videos that explain many different things, as does Explainia. If you're into infographics, you can go to Daily Infographic, and that map came from 40 maps that explain the world that are very, very, very cool. So thank you very much. And Rana, I don't give class time for this. They do it outside of class. So one part of reading circles is that they get the text in class, and then they go away for however long you have available to them, right? In my case, a week, and they come back having gone through all these roles as homework, and then they discuss what they found in class. Any other questions? I'll post the slide share in just a second. It's actually on the program underneath my description, but there it is. The recordings will be available pretty much immediately after the conference is over, and I think they will be on BELTA's website, and we'll put them on TESOL Toronto as well. So if you go to tesoltoronto.org or you follow me, then you can get the links pretty easily. So thank you so much. I'm going to stop the recording now.
Hi, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to Malu Sciamarelli's presentation, The Secret Passageways of Writing. Can everyone hear me okay? Great. So there's no doubt that writing is one of the most difficult skills for L2 learners to master. The difficulty lies not only in generating and organizing ideas, but also in translating these ideas into an intelligible text. In this session, Malu is going to present an activity of reading and writing based on The Shadow of the Wind, and show that the teacher is responsible for translating all the writing principles into practice and should constantly record, ponder, and analyze what they have done in the classroom and use their reflective experience as a basis for improving their practices. So Malu Sciamarelli has been working in Brazil for over 20 years as an English teacher, materials designer, translator, consultant for publishers, Cambridge English Language Assessment speaker, and speaking examiner. Currently, her main interests are writing and using her own short stories and literature in her creative writing classes. So with that, I'm going to turn my video off and turn it over to Malu. Everybody, please join me in welcoming Malu Sciamarelli.
Okay, thank you so much, Jessica, and thank you everybody for being here. Can you hear me well? You should just say yes. Okay, thank you. So if it fails or if you can hear me, just let me know, all right? Thank you very much. Thank you, Tyson and James and everybody at Toronto and TSL Toronto and BELTA for this invitation. I'm really glad to be here, and with you all that decided with so many other presentations and with John too. I thank you for being here, for deciding to be here. So, let's start. As it was said in the beginning, there is no doubt that writing is one of the most difficult skills for L2 learners to master. As I said, the difficulty lies not only in generating and organizing ideas, but also translating these ideas into a readable text. So, there are many theories about teaching writing, and we as a teacher have to think of these theories for implementing some factors and to consider too the factors when planning and teaching a course in writing. And this can be a very difficult task. So we teachers often have to ask ourselves, which theoretical strands are we going to adapt? What will be the focus of our course? What activities are likely to help students develop their own skills? There are also many books and writers that describe guidelines and practices and some principles which can make the planning of a writing course a less intimidating task. But also these guidelines and practices and theories, they are an important part in designing a writing course. From my point of view, it is the teacher who is responsible for translating these guidelines and these principles into practices. The teachers should always record, ponder, and analyze these guidelines. Yes, the teachers should constantly and systematically do it, and also use their reflective experience as a basis for improving their practices. We should, as teachers, when planning a writing course, we should always ask ourselves, what approach do you use in teaching writing? Do you all teach writing here? Yes, so what approach do you use? Do you use the genre-based approach, the process approach, or maybe an eclectic approach? Genre-based, a mixture, yes, I do too, Tyson. Genre-based. Okay, so before we start the course, we have to think about these approaches, which ones are we going to use? Yes, a mix, yes, I do too, Sarah. And I also, as I said, as a reflective practice, I also think of how successful my activities have been before, and my teaching practices. What kind of activities I commonly use when teaching those practices? And what's important too, how do we evaluate our students' writing? What criteria do we use? And so on and so forth. Yes? So these are just some of the things that we may consider when planning a writing course, when planning on teaching a writing course. So today, I will focus my presentation and my activity in these three factors that I think they're very important and that I use in my practices. Yes? The first one is the student's motivation. So to develop a creative and effective environment for learning, in which students will feel comfortable and motivated to explore their own writing, and they will discover what are their strong and weak points. So I create some activities that they will be motivated to write. They will ask me to write, and I will show you one of these activities today. The second point is the teacher's creativity. So what do I mean by that? For teachers, as for us, an understanding of the characteristic of effective writing and the strategies used by writing, the guidelines, those factors that we are talking about, it's not enough. For me, it's really important for the teachers to develop new and innovative activities to motivate more the students and use our own creativities. And I do hope that we as a teacher in the writing course, we will write with our students and present our own writing for discussion. In that way, we will keep in the forefront of what we and our students learn and experience as we work together. I think this is very important, because then we are not going to be only a model. We are going to sit and work together, and we are going to be co-writers. Yes? So, to illustrate this activity for motivating students, the first point, I am going to present this activity based on the book The Shadow of the Wind. Has anyone, one of you read this book before? Or you've heard this book before, The Shadow of the Wind? No, don't worry, Tyson. I've just read it this year too with my students. Yeah, so The Shadow of the Wind, as I wrote here, was written by Carlos Ruiz-Zafón. This writer was born in Barcelona in 1964 and moved to Los Angeles in 1994. This book, The Shadow of the Wind, was his first adult novel written in 2001, so 13 years ago. In this book, the main character, Daniel, tries to find more books by Julián Carapaz, but cannot. So that's one of the writers in the book. And he discovers that the devil is destroying them all and tries to get Daniel's copy from him to destroy. So just for you to understand what is the book about and what I did here. So first, my first point, the student's motivation. So how do I do this? It depends on the number of students that I have in class. I ask them to get together in pairs or groups. And then I ask them to discuss how they usually choose a book. And so here are just some ideas. They're recommended by a friend, if they're familiar with the author's work, if they buy secondhand, borrow from a library, read a review, like a cover, or if they like this or that author, if they read reviews too, if they, the covers that they can remember which made an impression on them, and any other thing. How do you usually choose a book when you're going to read? Well, I confess that I follow the recommendation, and sometimes I like the cover, so the books have list recommendations, yes. I'm very visual, so if I like a cover and if there are images inside, I go on reading the book too. And also by the author. Okay, but sometimes they do. Me, Tyson. Recommendations mostly. Yes, the students, they say lots of things. But my students, they never choose a book from the review. Yes? So here, this is how I started the activity. I ask them to discuss, yes, and this is a list that I got from their ideas. Yes? Then the second part of this activity, I ask them to look at these two pictures, here, yes, and then with these words and these short phrases, I ask them to describe the picture. They try to discuss if it's with a partner or if they're in a group, to discuss and to see the picture on the right. What is this place? And the picture on the left, it's Daniel. We know that's Daniel, the boy. Yes? And what seems to be happening? So I just want a description. So what do you think this place is? Tyson asked me when he saw the slide, and I said that it will be a secret, so I'm going to share it today. So if you look at the picture, what do you think it is? Fantasy library. A library, okay. And everybody agrees that's a library. So let me just... Any other ideas? So I asked the students to a library in a church. Wow! A library to the world of inside the books. Wow, that's a great idea, Tyson. Any other ideas? I think everybody went to a library. Yes? But in this first moment, yes, all the students, they said it's a library too, that resembles a library. Yes? And I asked them to talk and to describe these pictures and write this description with their ideas. If they are in a group, they will write only one description, or if they are in pairs, they are going to write only one description too. Okay, so I will read one of their descriptions in one of my groups they did. So the building resembles a beehive in shape. It is immense, as can be seen by the size of both at the side of people standing on the various platforms and steps, both at the sides and in the middle of the room. The arches and sides of the room make it appear palatial, and it is a complex building with staircases leading to a labyrinth of passageways. A high glass dome in the roof of the building allows the sun to enter and the darkness of the room is pierced by light. So this is one of the descriptions of a group of students that I had. Yeah. So after that, and before they read the first part of the reading passage, that's when the activity is going to be focused, I showed them these questions and asked them just to focus at the picture and try to answer these questions. What is very important here is that I don't use these questions to check understanding, if they do understand or not. Okay, the audio is not working? Oh, sorry, it's not for me. So sorry. Yeah. So the questions, as I said, is not for checking understanding. Okay, it is just for motivating them to read, to want to read, and to create their own ideas. So again, if they're in a pair or in a group, I ask them to think of these questions, to think of the answers of these questions, and take some notes too. They don't have to write everything, but just to take some notes. Okay? So then, of course, you won't have time to read everything, but then if you want to have the slides, this is the first part of the reading passage. So again, I will come back. Yeah, so where do you think this place is? And I want them to name the city or the country. Yes, what it is. Yeah, so most of them said it was a library before. And I said, what is Daniel doing, the boy? Why is he there? How does he feel? And how would you feel in this situation? So here, they can share their ideas and write. After that, they will read this first passage. Yes, it is a library. Yes, but it is a cemetery of forgotten books. As they say, this is the name of this place. Okay. So after that, again, after reading the first passage, I do it one more time before they read the second. What does Daniel's father do for a living? If you like to read the passage after that, why is the place called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books? Have you got any idea? Why would somebody call a place like that, this picture that is on the slide, on the background of the slide, why would that be called the Cemetery of Forgotten Books? Yeah, that's interesting. So because of that, I started reading the book Tyson, and my students too. And so they have to come up with an idea. And this is very interesting too. What happens to a person who visits this place for the first time? No, it's not a sad place. You're going to see why if you read the book, Jessica. You're going to see why it's not a sad place. Yes? So you see, if you read, I put it here, the passage, the second passage, again complete in the next 2 slides. Okay, so if you want to read them again, it is a cemetery of forgotten books. If people read the books and their books are not forgotten, again, you like when people visit, yes, that's it. So, and they say that the books, they have souls. Yes? And we, as readers, we give the books life. And you're going to see if you read the passage, what happens the first time, you have to choose a book and care for it for the rest of your life. And so the book, it would be just like your child, your son or your daughter. And if you don't have any, a pet, as I do. Okay, so I repeat this again. These steps. After that, I ask my students, what is going to happen next? And will it be positive or negative? After that, because Daniel, just to summarize it, he chose a book. He's never heard of the author before, and he doesn't know. We don't know what's going to happen only with this passage. Yes. So, as I said, with these questions, yes, they are motivated to read the passage. They're not checking understanding. I don't check understanding with this question. They are going to write their ideas, and surprisingly, my students, they asked me to read the book. Yeah, so it was not. Again? Okay, can you see me? All right, I'm here. As I said, surprisingly, the students, my students, they asked me to read the book. I hadn't programmed that before, so my idea was to use just these 2 passages to Oh, okay, so can you see me now? What did you miss? What was the last part you see? I'm sorry, it's happening. Nothing major, it's okay, okay. So, that's fine, as I said before. And then, I hadn't read the book before, and then I started to read when the student asked me to go on and read. So this is how I motivate my students to write little bits of pieces of writing, because they're sharing their ideas, the description of the pictures in the beginning, and in a second place, so they want me to read, so I did the two activities at the same time. The second point of my presentation is that what I was going to focus is the teacher's creativity. So what did I do here? Yes, okay. Yes. So this is the second point, the teacher's creativity. So it's very important for the teachers to use their own creativity to develop new activities, new ideas, yes, to motivate students to want to write. So I think I will turn off the camera. Maybe that's because it's slow and there's a delay. Yes. So if you don't mind, I think I'll turn off the camera. Yes. So I think that's fine because I can see that some people are having a delay. Okay. So let's see if it's better this way. Okay. So the second focus of my presentation will be the teacher's creativity. So what I did after that, with the same groups or the same partners, I asked my students to read these topics. So books, the first topic will be this. Books have souls and should be preserved. It is not worth keeping books once you have read them. Nowadays we can download books from the internet, so we don't have to need to buy real books anymore. There is nothing like a real book, and reading books is a waste of time. All the knowledge you need is online. So I asked the students to discuss each one of these topics for 1 or 2 minutes and choose one. So I had a big group, and luckily I'd have one group for each of these topics. Yes? Yes, that's what they say. Yeah, we don't need to read books. Yes? All the knowledge you need is online. You just Google it and it's there. Yeah, so one group chose this, but surprisingly, many of the groups, they wanted to use the first ones. Books have souls and should be preserved. Yes. But then I asked them to focus on one, write down their main ideas, their main focus, and present their ideas to the other parts of the class. Yes. And in this way, there will be an activity of speaking and then writing the main points. After that, I showed them this video, The Fantastic Flying Books of Mr. Morris Lesmore. Have you seen this before? It's a short film that got an Oscar some years ago. Oh, Anastasia, you should. Yes. Unfortunately, we won't have time to see it here because it's 15 minutes. Yes. It's quite long, but it's so beautiful that it's worth seeing it. Yes. There are some points in common with the book, with the reading passage that they read, so that would be nice for you to see it. Worth watching for sure. Yes, it's amazing. So what I did, I see this film with my students and asked them to take notes as they watch it. You're going to see that there's only background music, so even if they want to talk or share some ideas while we are watching it, they can. So after that, we went to the real writing. Yes. So here I presented again these 4 points, and they could choose what they wanted to do. Actually, I had the first 4 points, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do with the next one. So first, the first point, I asked them to write a story based on their own ideas, of course, with the focus of books and libraries, as we are going to see in the film if you watch it, and the passages. Yes. A second idea will be write the filming words plus ideas from the reading passage. Yes? Some of my students did it, and I have very beautiful pieces of writing. As I said, there's only music for this film. So they wrote everything, and they had some ideas from the reading passage. Another point would be write a mini saga. That's a story in exactly 50 words, using the ideas discussed, maybe some vocabulary that were used. Another one would be a poem, book half so. So what did I do here? I wrote book in vertical, half so, these 3 words in vertical, and they have to write one word starting with each letter. For example, B-O-O-K-H-A-V-E-S-O-U-L-S. Yes? So they create a poem using this word on the topic of books, of course. Then, as we are still reading the book, after that, we are going to write a review. So we are going to study and write a review. As I said, I use an eclectic approach to writing. So we agreed, depending on the book, we agreed on using some of these topics. I had another group that I also used this activity, and they wanted to write them all. Yes? And I sit and write with them. Yes, everything that they decided to do, for example, the poem. I wrote my own poem, a mini saga, I'm writing, and then I'm going to present. And we do a peer editing. Yes? And as I was doing that, I presented this third topic, the teachers as writers. Do you write together with your students when you teach writing? Always, yes. I think this is very important. Sometimes you should collaborative work. That's nice. Okay. Yeah, so what I see is that most teachers don't do it. I like to do that because I feel that students are more motivated. They're always surprised when I have new groups that I sit and I write with them. And I present my own piece of writing for editing too. Yes? So here, what did I do? I show them a story that I wrote. Yes, and these are all notes that I used to make when I was a child. And the topic is, where do your stories come to life? Yes, so they read and they can see that I do write, and I do write these activities with them. Yes, and with my students, what do? I have these 2 groups. Yes, the first one is the Creative Writers Society, that I have with 2 groups of students. That's a secret group, so it means that everything that we write there, only we can see. Yes? And the other one, the Creative Fiction Writers. What is interesting here is that, as I said, I write with them, so I propose some topics and some ideas, but the students also propose topics and ideas. So sometimes they want to write something, one student has an idea and he posts there. And then I do the activities that are proposed. They're on Facebook or in class. And so this is very, very, very important. As I said, creative activity could be described as a type of learning process where teacher and pupil are located in the same individual. So what do you think about that? Do you think that we should sit and write and share our piece of writing to peer editing too? Would you do that if you don't do it? I mean, if you don't write with your students, would you write and share your piece of writing for them to edit or for them to give their ideas? Yes, Jessica. I had some new insight and new ideas. Yes. And stories, yes. And you're going to see that if you are curious to read what I wrote, where your stories come to life, many people, they continue the story. So I think that the story is never finished. As I said about poems, the poems, they never end. Yes, they just go on forever and forever. So it also what happens, and also shows that everyone edits, yes. So as I said, teachers as students and students as teachers, we all learn a lot from that. Yes, everyone can edit, not only, and we show that we are not the owners of knowledge. We teachers are not the owners, we are not the writers, we are co-writers. So we teach, we write, and everybody works together. Yes. I just like to focus again. I think I was too fast, so we can. I'm going to share some more ideas here. But if you want to interrupt and say something, please feel free to do so. The topic, yes, of these activities and this presentation was to show that we have to motivate the students to want to write. That's very important, because the ideas, I don't know if it happens with your students. My students always say, writing is boring. I don't want to write. I don't like writing activities and writing classes. So with these activities or any other activity that you can develop, you can show to them that writing is fun actually. Yeah? So by doing so, you'll have to use your own creativity so that students will feel comfortable. And also, when you write with them, when you become a co-writer, you are going to show that they can risk writing too, when you present your writing for them to edit. Yes. So I would like just to spend some minutes here talking about these groups that I belong to. Yes. The first one is the Asian English Language Teachers Creative Writing Project. Yes. So here, if you want to read more about it, yes, about this group, I am an associate member, and the teachers as writers. So there are lots of activities that you can find in it, activities and materials for teachers and for students too, that you can use in language learning. This is based on creative writing. And this is something that I really like to say about creative writing. I believe that there is a misconception about creative writing, that some people say that creative writing, you just sit and write. And you have to use your imagination, your feelings, and your thoughts. Yes, I do believe that you have to use your imagination, your feelings, your thoughts, but creative writing is rather guided writing. Yes? For example, if you want to write a story, you have some guidelines. Mini saga, you have to use exactly 50 words. If you are going to write some different kind of poems, a haiku, for example, you have 3 lines of 5 syllables, 7 and 5 syllables. And so that's very important to follow these guidelines, and so on and so forth. So although creative writing uses an aesthetic purposes, an aesthetic approach, it is rather guided. So you can see some activities here that the teachers are posting for everybody to use. Yes. Another group, that's the C group. Do you know what C stands for in here? Do you have an idea? Yeah, it's written there, yes, the creativity group, yes. Yes, you can see on the link, yes. So this is another group that I belong to. It is not an organization with a dogma, but it's a collection of individuals and a cluster of ideas, many of which the members hold in common, mainly the creativity. The initial point of contact in this group is our shared conviction that creativity can and should be reinforced in ELT through collaborative action. I'm reading our aim here. Our aim is to make classroom practice more inspiring and therefore more effective by motivating students with our creativity. The outcome of our working together will be a cornucopia of concrete ways, techniques, inquiry, and strategies for making teaching more creative and inspiring, both for teachers, so we are more motivated to develop other activities, and for learners too, to bring us closer to the community, even outside the classroom wall. So I think that this is very important. So this is what we believe in, this creativity as a way to create a more motivated classroom. And as I said, not only the classroom, but it goes beyond this, much beyond this. You can also see the link of my website where I share some of the activities that I do. Sometimes I blog and I put there so that everybody can use it and share. And my email, then if you want to write something more to me. As I said, I think I went too fast. So if you have any comments or if you have any questions, I'm here available for some minutes more. Okay, that's the website and my email, if you want to write. Or even, I think it's important, sometimes people think, oh, we are going to write about creative writing, and we also have to share a lesson plan. Yes? I think that it doesn't have to be always this way. Sometimes we write just for the sake of writing, yes? For reading something beautiful, a poem, and so on. So if you'd like to share some of them, I do on my website too. Thank you, Leo. Actually, it was made by a professional, yes? I just post things there. It was my idea, yes, but it was not made by me. Thank you. So if you have any question about the activities or about the groups, I will be very happy to answer them. And I'm sorry about the problems with the videos here too, yes? I think it got too slow. Yes, I am on Twitter, so let me write here. Everything that's connected, my website, Twitter, email, it's always Malu Sciamarelli. Yes. You're welcome, Tara. Yes. So if you have any questions, I'll be here. Or comments. As would you read the book now? Are you curious to read The Shadow of the Wind? Thank you, Vance, again. Yes, yes. I haven't finished that yet, I confess. I'm reading together with my students. So every week, yes, we set what are the chapters we are going to read. Yes, thank you so much, Tyson, for inviting me, participating in this awesome conference online where I could share this.